Last week I tried to impress upon you that being a spiritually whole person requires us to integrate our intuition, regarded as a mighty elephant, with our intent, represented as a often powerless elephant rider. This integration offers the possibility of relating to the world as I and thou. That is to say, in a way that is vibrant, life-affirming, and personally engaged. And I left you with a lofty quote from Martin Buber, which I'll revisit now. "When thou is spoken," writes Buber, "the speaker has no thing for his object. For where there is a thing, there is another thing. Every it is bounded by others. It exists only through being bounded by others. But when thou is spoken, there is no thing. Thou has no bounds." So we begin here for the convenience of continuity, yes. However, I raised this quote up because after laboring so last week to sanctify Buber, I'm here to tell you now that he is wrong. Okay, he's not actually wrong. But when we hear things like, "thou has no bounds," we need to be very careful. Indeed, Buber isn't so much wrong here as he is exuberant. But we are left with this paradox. Without bounds or boundaries, there can be no sense of relationship. Yet I-thou is predicated on relationship. So I'm not a Buber scholar. He may resolve this paradox on his own, but perhaps we will profit more by struggling with it ourselves. For life to be in relationship, the I and the thou must maintain the tension of separateness. We are how we relate. We are not that which we relate to. I am not you. When you are angry, I do not have to be angry. When your elephant of intuition does something self-destructive or behaves in an anxious way, my elephant does not have to jump after it or be infected by its behavior. It is I and thou, not I am thou. I am not you, I cannot fix you, nor can you fix me. There's a crucial distinction between, on the one hand, being influenced and held accountable and inspired to revision by our herd and by individuals within that herd. And on the other hand, identifying with the actions and dispositions of the others as though they were you. Empathy has its place, but an empathy without healthy boundaries, without the knowledge of where you end and another begins, destroys relationships and threatens community. So healthy communities are comprised of healthy persons with healthy boundaries. If you collapse yourself into the other, or worse, think the other should be you, and so gobble up all awareness of distinction, you will not have anyone to lean on, or to lean on you. You will live in a world of constant disappointment and frustration, for no one is you but you. So this sermon is about creating community. But more than that, it's about creating a healthy community. And more than that, it's about creating this community. A community that encourages us on our spiritual journey. A community that is less of a place and more of a path. All community creates a matrix of influence on us. A matrix of narrative and experience that comprise the local reality of our community. This matrix relates with the matrices of other encompassing or encompassed communities to constitute the general reality of our culture and our world. And these matrices create, but also limit our reality. However, it is possible to transcend that matrix. That is what one definition of enlightenment might be, transcending the matrix. We will explore that dazzling possibility in 2 weeks. So you'll have to come back. For now, let's recall why community is important. Last week we discovered that communities help us integrate our intuition and our intent, our elephant and our right. Because communities are places where our elephants feel safe. Safe enough to engage in revision. And revision is an integrative process. So clearly, healthy, friendly communities are beneficial. Furthermore, according to the University of Virginia social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, we have evolved to be groupish. Haidt and others, including Darwin, argue for an evolutionary process called group selection. So in group selection, genes that promote the health of the group would be evolutionarily selected because the group promotes the health of the most individuals. Of course, some groups do better than others. Some groups perish. And so it is that where survival of the fittest is concerned, the fittest here means the most cohesive. Haidt and Darwin demonstrate that cohesive tribes that begin to function like one individual organism generally outcompete their non-cohesive rivals. So the Borg win. Now, this is true in many species and is obvious in humans when you consider what it takes to win a war or a political campaign or organize agriculture and distribution systems, etc. Cohesion wins. So evolutionary pressures have crafted us to be a groupish species, predisposed to subjugate the interest of ourself to the interest of the group. Given equal resources, those who do that best survive the eons, survive the wars, survive and sometimes thrive, and in fact have produced us. Yet, there is a danger here as well. This is, after all, a recipe for tyranny. And now, our Unitarian Universalist infatuation with diversity becomes not only an act of justice, but a strategy for relative liberty for the group as a whole and for ourselves within the group. Last week I mentioned how friendly elephants are herd is our best hope for integrating our intuition with our intent and thus becoming capable of speaking with our whole being. But if those elephants merely and only corroborate our predispositions and our intuition without compassionately challenging them, no revision is possible. When our principles make mention of the acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth, this is the wisdom that they are tapping into. So within a broad matrix, our diversity of spirituality, heritage, economics, politics, and on, is an invitation to spiritual growth. Our diversity, which we mention at the beginning of every service, is an invitation to the stranger. It is also an invitation to our own spiritual growth. Diversity makes us accountable. Diversity requires us to come up with reasons why we have made the right decision or to discover that we have not made the right decision. Those reasons, produced by the writer, become, over time, narratives that influence future decisions. These narratives can begin to influence the elephant. Reason is justification. Diversity is discovery. Yet the political scientist Robert Putnam has found that contrary to our assumptions, diversity seems to trigger selfishness and social isolation rather than cohesion. He found that diversity causes people to be less interested in contributing to their communities. Yet diversity is a cornerstone of our religious hope. So this raises all sorts of questions for us Unitarian Universalists. How do we value community, which produces selflessness, and diversity, which produces selfishness? If, in order for our diversity to hold us accountable and encourage us to personal growth, we first need commonality to bind us together, does this mean that we need a dogma? Does this necessitate a creed? If you reject those possibilities out of hand, you may already have a dogma and a creed. Now, I believe we actually have a great deal in common. But without dogma or creed, this commonality defies easy articulation. And perhaps that is proof of its legitimacy. And yet, without turning it into a test of faith that diminishes diversity, we must do our best to articulate it. This effort at self-definition is the crucial question with which our faith has always wrestled. There have been articulations of it that have satisfied for a time. And then we enter a chrysalis phase, a cocoon of ambiguity, and we evolve. I believe that we are in the midst of the chrysalis at the moment. This means the opportunity and necessity to articulate our commonalities anew is before us anew. The survival of our faith will depend on that conversation. And Haidt provides some insight here. Haidt, the author, not the emotion. He cites a study of communes and reports that religious communes survived longer than secular communes. Comparing each commune revealed that the more sacrifices demanded by each commune was directly correlated with the duration of its life. However, sacrifice did not seem to prolong the life of secular communes. Only religious ones. So what's going on here? Why did the religious communes outlast the secular communes, even with the same demands for sacrifice? Well, Haidt said the difference was that religious communes held something sacred at their core. Their sacred center made them more efficient, more cohesive, more evolutionarily promising. Haidt, incidentally, defines the sacred as the ability to endow ideas, objects, and events with infinite value. What do we endow with infinite value? The chalice? The principles? Our history? Our hymns? Our sources? I don't think so. chalice may be Sunday. It's only about 50 years old, and this takes some time. Our covenant comes close. In fact, our covenant comes quite close. Or it should. Our word and bond should be of infinite value. But the question occurs to me, are we as a people nervous about the truth that we already know? Are we afraid of the demands and sacrifices that some latently understood truth would call to us if we were to face it? Any idea about what we hold as sacred will bring with it the requirement of profound commitment and the need for courage. So given our attraction to a community that yearns for both cohesion and liberty, given that our elephants have migrated to a herd that values equally community and diversity, and given my own experiences, understandings, questions, and narratives, I believe that what we latently hold as sacred and what we may cultivate as sacred is we. Not each other in isolation, nor the group above all, nor is it even particularly this group exclusively, but we as individuals in profound relationship, I and thou, within and beyond our walls, I and thou. Here may be infinite value. In light of this, the boundlessness of I and thou that Buber referred to makes sense. For it is in relationship that we find the sacred, that we cultivate the infinite. Yet as we discovered last week, the inducement of relationship of I and thou depends in large part on grace. I once heard the former Notre Dame football coach, Lou Holtz, explain that there was no such thing as luck. It was just being prepared for opportunity. In that same way, we cannot generate grace, but we can prepare for it, as we do here in worship. And by preparing, invite it and be aware of it when grace occurs. We are our relationships. We are how we relate. The emancipation from the boundedness of it is not a collapse of I into the other. It is not an identification as another. Rather, it is a move of identity from the delusion of the psychological omnivore, or conversely of solitude, a move from there into the fullness of relationship. It's like dancing. You're there with your dancing partner, and you keep trying to move with or as him or her, but you keep knocking knees and stepping on toes. It's when you stop trying to move with your partner or as your partner and start moving to the music. The dance of two becomes one. When I say I and thou to you, I do not become you, but I and thou become something more. That is the sacred. That is the causeway into infinite value. It is practiced, and a good way to prepare for it is by inviting diversity within cohesion, creating or discovering something sacred in common, and by maintaining healthy boundaries that enable us to be I and thou. Thou has no bounds.